the representatives of the scientific and modern subjects enter into an alliance with the legions of parents keen to have their sons only study subjects which have obvious and straightforward employment in the job market, this only serves to swell the unthinking clamor against dead languages, and I use that term in inverted commas. Whatever other scientists may say in their haste, the thoughtful and reflective scientist requires no teacher of Latin or Greek to tell them that the languages and literatures of 2,000 years, however fluid or interrupted, or challenging or changing they may have been, from Homer to the fall of the Roman Empire, and in the East, even to the end of the 6th century in the Byzantine Empire, was a far larger arc of human knowledge and culture than to the other modern specialties to which they are so often compared. Whether the classics hold this place because of their intrinsic beauty, or if I may borrow the words of the famous classicist R.C. Jebb, which is something I often say to parents, we study the classics for the ground simplicity of their statement of the everlasting problems of human life. That's very rarely is that convincing to parents, but still I like to roll it out. So whether they hold their place by their enormous contribution to the intellectual life of Europe, both in the past, and I would even argue today, as strong today, whether the classics acts as the sources and inspiration of modern literature, from Harry Potter to the retelling of Spartan victories at Thermopylae in film, or by their still dominant influence in the greatest English poets from the 15th through to the 21st century, or by all of these things together, it doesn't really matter. The classics hold the place, and they cannot be relegated to the position of an esoteric study without a significant impoverishment of our culture. Science has come to the forefront in most places now, and in the UK, less than 10% of state schools offer any classical subjects to their students at all. 2 years ago, AQA, the largest exam board for A-levels and GCSEs in the UK, announced that it would be scrapping A-level subjects in classical civilization, archaeology, and art history. There is now only one exam board in England which still offers classical civilization as a subject. I feel that it is a shame for classics. What used to be the queen of the arts, which offers joy and breadth to its students, is now an opportunity largely exclusive to wealthy private school students in the greater detriment of our society as a whole. The present attacks on the classics in the UK and North America, and to a lesser extent in mainland Europe, are inspired by the demand for a quick utilitarian result and the modern fetish of the absorption of the up-to-date. Such terms as culture, discipline, utility, and a liberal education have been much bandied about in all of these controversies, and in each of these the terms are equivocal and question-begging, and they hardly admit of an authoritative definition, particularly in the modern era, where the word culture rests on the multicultural quicksand. Yet you all understand these concepts well enough to know what I mean by saying that the study of the exact sciences like chemistry, physics, mathematics yields things like utility and discipline and kind of culture, and equally on the other hand, that classics gives us culture and discipline and kind of utility. And yet its critics would seem to believe that classics ought to be lumped in with a vast array of other miscellaneous subjects, which are more popular, mainly because they impart neither discipline nor utility, but only information and intellectual dissipation. In my own opinion, to demand that university students study modern European languages, to study politics or civics, to study philosophy, theology, or history, without any preparation in the classics, is a sorry joke. And the teachers of English may also take the same warning to heart. Without any understanding of the classical text, Shakespeare becomes only a belated bard of feudalism, and Milton's diction is nowadays so obsolete to modern readers that he might as well have been a contemporary of Homer. Even the Christian Bible has become obsolete. If we reduce classical studies to the position of an esoteric study, these dead languages, all we will be able to do is watch with amusement as future attempts to teach history, philology, and higher criticism of English literature in an environment that is bereft of any serious critical engagement. So why do the classics matter? It matters because it is the ground upon which the house of modern humanities is built. It is a serious discipline in education, so that the cause of all humane culture and historic criticism is bound up with it. They were the first and remain the highest of the humanities. The readers and students of literature, we might conceivably forego knowledge of the best literary masterpieces. We might be able to sit them down in complete ignorance of the years of uninterrupted civilization, from Aeschylus to Shakespeare. But that would be the beginning of our losses. The languages of Latin and Greek, their literatures, their philosophy, the whole tradition of the past 400 years cannot be completely understood. They would only be like kissing a woman behind a veil. It is impossible to explain this to those who have not already found this to be true in their own experience. They are not initiated, that is to say, they have not yet been introduced to the classics as the lingua franca of European culture. The rich vocabulary found in the study of classics, its terms and its criticism, its terminology of ancient science still used today, the origins of modern philosophy, with their cumulative associations of nearly 3,000 years back to Homer, are far too many nowadays merely arbitrary counters of memorization. They forget that they cannot estimate the thought of their own world or any other generation because they do not know how to distinguish its peculiar quality from our common inheritance. The talk of ineffectual study of Latin and Greek is nonsense or misrepresentation. It is nothing more than the indictment of bad teaching, which is not special to classics. Undisciplined students will doubtless dawdle over everything, whether it be French or maths, so long as the teachers permit it. But in a serious school, one-fourth of the students' time at A level for 2 years is enough for the acquisition, together with the power to read Cicero and Virgil with pleasure, and likely they will develop more English than any other student who omits Latin and Greek. There is, and always will be, ample room for a reasonable amount of Latin and Greek in any rational curriculum of studies. And so my conclusion. It is deplorable to have been taught Latin badly, to have forgotten how to read Virgil or Cicero, but to have had no Latin or Greek or classics at all practically means that you do not know the logic or understand the categories of general grammar or those of forms of language. You will not know and cannot safely learn from a lexicon the essential and root meanings of your English language. You cannot either use them conscientiously, their prime force. You will be mystified by the variations of meanings and the like Latin derivations in Shakespeare, the Romance languages. You will have no feeling for the structure of a good sentence, which modern prose inherited from Isocrates and Cicero. You will have difficulty learning French or Italian. The difficulty will be tripled for you. That you have no key to the terminology of science and philosophy, to law and international law. You will have no understanding of Latin maxims. You will have no understanding of pharmacists and botanists and physicians' Latin. You cannot guess at the meaning of countless technical phrases. You will not be familiar with familiar quotations or proverbs, the compendious Latin formula that are so essential a part of an educated individual. I'm going to make a little side note here. I'm going to throw this in anyways. I recently had our mathematics department approach me to translate their scholarship board, which was in Latin. They had all these names up the board, but they had no idea what the honorary inscription was. And that it seems staggering that you can have so many educated individuals in a room, and they couldn't even read their own honors board. So I did them a good turn and translated it for them. Without Latin, without Greek, without classics, you cannot study early modern history of philosophy. You cannot read the masterpieces in the original text. The cities of Greece and Rome may as well be as remote for you as China. Virgil, Horace, and Cicero, these are mere names. French literature becomes nothing more than a series of unintelligible illusions. Travel in Italy loses half its charm. You cannot decipher an inscription on the Appian Way, or even for us in England, in Westminster Abbey, you wouldn't even be able to verify a quotation from St. Augustine. You wouldn't be able to read or understand the Vulgate printed on the walls of the church. And what about all those works of modern thought, from Bacon to Descartes to Grotius or Spinoza's Ethics, to say nothing of consulting the older documents of English law? All are sources of civil law on which the laws of much of Europe are based. You wouldn't be able to read a bull of the Pope. You wouldn't even be able to read a telegram of a German emperor. You wouldn't be able to read Milton or the Elizabethans, who are entirely unintelligible without Latin. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why classics matter. Thank you.